Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to /Malicious Compliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, we've got smug lawyers, scummy rental car companies, Karen parents, and bad roommates all getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your posts to this email right here. Let's dive in. A long time ago, I used to work in the claims department for one of the top auto insurance companies in America. One day, I get this phone call from a lawyer looking to file a new accident claim for his client. His client is also my customer, so I explain that I can take the initial report from the lawyer, but I'll also be contacting the client to get his side of the story. The lawyer immediately tells me that I'm not to contact the client because he's being represented by a lawyer. I explain that until I have an official letter of representation on file, I have every right to contact the client. So anyways, I proceed to gather all the details from the lawyer. Once I finish filing the claim, I generate a claim number and give it to the lawyer. I then called the customer and was basically told very rudely by him that I'm only to talk to his lawyer. He then hung up. Right after, the lawyer gets an official letter of representation on file. So I can't contact his client anymore. I'm not able to speak with the client unless given permission by the lawyer. The lawyer was a total pompous ass, and he was definitely trying to throw his weight around just to show he was important. The guy definitely thought he was putting me in my place. He then proceeds to tell me that the client has minor injuries, such as back and neck pain, and is going to see a doctor. I then explain that the client may see whatever doctor he wishes, but it's best to have us get in contact with his doctor of choice as soon as possible, so we can start using the coverage to pay for any medical bills. At that point, the lawyer gets all huffy-puffy with me, and he tells me the client will go see a doctor and get all the medical help he needs. And once it's all done and over with, he'll send us a bill that we'll be required to pay in full. That's when I explain it doesn't work that way. Some doctors require certain payments from insurance companies upfront, or at least be in contact with the insurance company to confirm certain payments will be paid. I also explained the client only had a certain amount of coverage that he pays for. We are not required as an insurance company to pay more than what the client has on his policy. For example, if the client has $10,000 in coverage, we would only pay half of a $20,000 medical bill. I also explain if the doctor hasn't been in contact with an insurance company, they may charge the client, and the client will have to go through a different, longer process for us to reimburse him than if we just paid the doctor up front. Now, I know this sounds like a bunch of corporate BS, and it is. I don't make the rules. I'm really trying my hardest to make this as easy as possible for the client, but the lawyer isn't having it at all. The smug lawyer then demands that his client will go to whatever doctor he wants, and he'll receive whatever treatment he wants, and we will pay for it in full. And the client will pay nothing out of pocket regardless of the cost of treatment. I went back and forth with the lawyer, but eventually, you gotta understand that you're just going in circles, and it's time to take the loss. So I do, and we move on to the vehicle. The lawyer says it's damaged, but the client drove the car from the accident scene straight to the lawyer's office. The windshield was damaged, and there were fluids leaking from the car. I recommended that we tow the vehicle to a repair shop. I explain the customer has towing coverage, and we can get a tow truck free of charge. Well, the lawyer refuses this, and he says the client can drive the car. The lawyer also demands that the client uses a repair shop of his choice. I explain to the lawyer that the client's absolutely allowed to use a shop of his choice, but that we have to send an adjuster out to the car to inspect the damage and give a quote to the repair shop. The reason we did this is a lot of times, body shops will take advantage of insurance companies because they know we'll pay, and the shop fixes things that don't need to be fixed, and they purposely buy more expensive parts to hike up the price. It's pretty much insurance fraud. So we usually send an expert of our own to assess the damage and write up a fair and legit repair estimate. The lawyer refuses this, and he says he isn't telling us the shop the car's going to, and once again, we'll get a bill once all the work is done. and will be required to pay the full bill regardless of the price. I explain that we don't cover the cost of aftermarket parts, only factory parts. It's listed in our contract, the contract that the customer agreed to when he signed up. Once again, corporate BS, I know. I don't make the rules, and I'm really trying to help the customer out here so he doesn't have a bunch of unnecessary crap to deal with. I argued with this lawyer for a very long time about how things work, and the way he was trying to handle this was going to end up costing the client loads of money. The lawyer was on a path of destruction, and he was making every possible scenario worse for the client. The lawyer wasn't having any of it though, and of course, he threatened to sue and all that crap. I finally gave in, and I let the lawyer do whatever he wanted. I knew the worst case scenario would come of this, and I figured I would let the lawyer and client feel the consequences of their stupid decisions, and the lawyer trying to assert his dominance. I let him and his client do what they thought was best. I mean, why listen to a professional, right? So what ends up happening is the customer takes his car to some sketchy shop. They do exactly what we feared, and they jack the price way up. The shop put expensive aftermarket parts on the car, which we don't cover. The customer had to pay out of pocket for a bunch of stuff to the repair shop. The repair shop also took longer than 30 days to repair his car because the longer they have the car, the more they can charge. We only cover 30 days for a rental car, so the client ends up paying out of pocket for a rental too. Also, the client had to pay some out-of-pocket expenses to his doctor, as his coverage wasn't enough. We didn't refund him for a lot of the expenses at the body shop, which amounted to well more than a few $1,000s. In the end, the customer had a ton more out-of-pocket expenses and headaches, all because of an a-hole lawyer. Oh my goodness, I bet the guy regrets using that lawyer big time. And seriously, the only person who truly won here was the lawyer, who probably made a lot of money off his client. Definitely not worth the money, and I would be royally pissed if I were the customer. But hey, at the same time, it's hard to feel bad when the customer rudely told OP to only talk to their lawyer. The guy got exactly what he asked for. So I rented a car for 5 weeks while my car was being repaired from a car accident. The rental company had great policies, no cleaning fee no matter how gross the car was, and unlimited miles, which was ideal for me as I live in the country and going anywhere is a drive. When my car was finally scheduled to be finished on a Monday evening, I called the rental car company on Sunday. I asked about the return details. They said the return time would be 5:30 p.m. Monday, but I could just leave it at the shop and leave the keys in the shop's drop box. I said sure, and the next night I went, got my car, left the keys in the box. I got in my car and the check engine light is on. So the shop says, come back tomorrow and we'll fix it. I go home, thinking that I'll be sitting at the shop all Tuesday because no other ride. On Tuesday morning, I wake up at 7 a.m. to the rental car company very angry, saying that they can't get into the drop box and the shop doesn't open until 9. I tell them I did what they said to do, to leave the keys at the drop box at 5:30. They then told me that they would be charging me an extra day. At that, I'm furious. I leave my house later and I arrive at the shop at 8:50. The rental car guys aren't there. I sit around and the shop opens. I then grab the rental keys and give them my car. Right on time, the rental car guys appear. They demand the keys and I ask if I'm still getting charged for an extra day. One guy's inspecting the car, while the other tells me, yes, I'm getting charged an extra day. The guy inspecting it then comes over and he says the car looks good. It should be ready to rent out immediately. Now, I had cleaned it the day before because I didn't want to be a jerk. At this point, I refuse to give him the keys. I say, since I'm getting charged an extra day, that means it's my car until 5:30 today, right? At that, he gets nervous. He says they need the car back. I respond, I'll give you the keys now if you don't charge me an extra day. But if I'm charged an extra day, I'm using this car. The guy refuses to bend, so I leave. At this point, I'm petty and angry, so I go straight home. I own a farm and it's been raining like mad lately. I get to work. And by the time 10 a.m. rolls around, the car's covered in mud. Like, this black car looks painted brown. I didn't trash the inside because I'm not that petty. I then hop in the car and drive to the rental place. I'm pretty much covered in mud at this point. I had put trash bags on the front seat to limit it. I walk into the rental place looking like I fell into a mud pit. The guy who refused to cancel the charge looks horrified. I tell them, this car's great for mudding. I'm gonna go mudding the rest of the day. I'm just swinging by to ask where to put the keys at 5:30. I'm all smiles and dripping sweetness. I watch the life leave him, his shoulder slump, and he says if I return the car right now, they'll cancel the charge because they really need to rent out the car. I give them the keys and take an Uber to the shop where my car's ready. No cleaning fee and no extra day charge. What a malicious compliance that was, and I just want to say, not all heroes wear capes. Some are just drenched in mud in a rental car. But yeah, shame on that scummy rental car company for trying to charge OP while already renting the car out to another person. I'd say that OP putting up a fight and getting petty was the least they could have done. Serves them right. So here's some background. I used to work at a family restaurant in my small town as a waiter/cook when I was a teenager. I also dropped out of high school after sophomore year. But I got my high school diploma through a technical college. That said, because I didn't go to school during the weekdays, I would often be scheduled to work since the majority of our staff was high school kids. I was the only male waiter working at this small family restaurant, and the only non-high school people who worked here was the owner and her son, who usually cooked during the busy afternoons. This story takes place on a Monday, and I was the only one at work other than my owner. She was in the back office doing whatever the heck she does. I'm tending to a few elderly customers who have been served their food, when in walks a man and who I presume to be his son. I've never seen either of them before, and this is a small town, so I figure they're just passing through and they stop to get some breakfast. They take a seat at a table and I bring them menus and ask them what to drink. Immediately, the dad makes a comment how he's never had a male waiter before, and I just shrug it off because it wasn't the first time someone said this. So I get their drinks, blah blah blah, and then wait till they're ready to order. The son orders a Mexican omelet, which is easy. The dad orders French toast. Now, almost all French toast has some cinnamon on it, but ours has way more than usual. We even call it cinnamon French toast on the menu. The dad then asked for double the cinnamon. I can't imagine that'll taste any good since cinnamon is a very strong tasting ingredient. So I suggest, sir, I can add a little more cinnamon if you'd like, but the recipe already has a lot in it, so double the cinnamon might taste a little overpowering. At that, the dad says, I didn't order your opinion. I try to say something, but he says, I said double the cinnamon. The guy's literally yelling at me, so I stop trying to talk some sense into him. The son looks embarrassed and I give them my friendliest smile, and I tell them I'll be right out with his orders. I then go to the back and I poke my head into the owner's door just to warn her that we're about to have a customer complaint. She heard the shouting and she makes me fill her in. She then goes out to talk with the man herself and she gets basically told the same response. Double the cinnamon. So I go make the French toast with the insane amount of cinnamon, and I serve that and the omelet before leaving to do a coffee round. Well, one bite in and the dad starts screaming at me. I come back to his table and I ask him what's wrong in my most friendliest of voices. The guy screams and says, "You put way more than twice the cinnamon in this. What the heck is wrong with you?" I tell him, "I assure you, sir, that's exactly what you ordered. That is double cinnamon." He then says, "Do you think I'm stupid? I'll have you fired for this, you dumbass." Now, I was actually rather speechless at this point because I've never had someone scream at me before. The son looks about ready to jump out the window, and even the owner came out of her office when the screaming started, and she looked shocked. The dad then starts screaming how he's not gonna eat this crap, and then he shoves the plate off the table like a child. The owner's livid at this point, and she tells him to pay and leave or else she'll call the cops. He then insists that he's not gonna pay for anything, and he's gonna tell everyone not to eat here and drive us out of business before storming out. His son quickly pays for the meal and follows Dad, who's still screaming at the top of his lungs outside. I was livid, especially since both me and the owner tried to warn him, but I calmed down after I saw 2 generous $20 bills that the son left me on their table. Yeah, that was definitely a sorry for my dad acting that way shame tip. And guys, it's always surprising to me when kids act more grown up than their own parents. But seriously, some people really need to learn humility and not double down when they make mistakes. Like, I just can't help but to feel bad for that poor son. Like, Opie only endured Dad's wrath for like 20 minutes. Meanwhile, the kid's probably dealt with mega Karen Dad his whole life. Like, my goodness. That said though, like, if you freak out to that extent over something so small, maybe you have to reevaluate your life. Like, go find some joy or something. And guys, if you think that dad was bad, listen to this next one. So this story takes place in the 90s, which was a very different world to live in than what we have today. It was sort of in the middle of a turning point between borderline abusive tough love and the advent of participation trophies. That said, my karate instructor at the time was kind of like Cobra Kai. Not cartoonishly hard-assed, but honestly kind of leaning in that direction. I'll call him Brass Balls. That said, sparring was light contact, and while you were encouraged to actually hit each other, you were of course expected to pull your punches, and everyone wore full sparring gear. Pads, cup, mouth guard, everything. So it wasn't like we were beating each other to death or anything. But if you drop your guard and you take a side kick straight to the gut, you'll probably be on the ground for a bit. Karate's a contact sport, and we fully treated it as such. Anyways, another part of that environment was only winners got promoted to the next belt. As part of your belt test, you had to do a kata to demonstrate your technique, and also win a light contact sparring match against another student, who is also up for a belt promotion. Only the winner gets promoted. So that said, one weekend after demonstrating my form and winning the sparring match, I get promoted. Let's call this kid Greg because he was a good guy. Now, Greg's dad, henceforth known as Crappy Dad, was losing his mind. Greg was totally cool with it. He was saying, hey, congratulations on the win. I guess I need to work on my defense. But Crappy Dad wasn't having it. He starts yelling at Brass Balls how Greg deserves something for getting beat up. That he pays X amount of dollars a month for these lessons, so he expects some results, blah blah blah. I also want to add that Greg wasn't in any way beat up. I hardly touched him. I simply got 8 points ahead because he didn't keep his guard up. So Brass Balls is like, you're insisting that your son Greg deserves a ribbon for losing? Okie dokie, artichoke. Now, I'm paraphrasing most of his story because it's been over 30 years. But he literally did say, okie dokie artichoke, and I'll never forget the grin he had as he did so. And that brings us to our malicious compliance. Brassball steps into his office, shutting the door behind him. The whole time, Greg's like, Dad, stop it, you're embarrassing me. This is why I live with Mom. But Crappy Dad apparently thought he managed to intimidate the big bad karate teacher into getting his way, so he was on cloud 9 until the office door opens and Brass Balls tucked a scrap of red ribbon into the belt of Greg's gi with the word loser written on it. Crappy Dad is speechless, sputtering like a fish out of water, before Brass Balls deliver the coup de grace. He says, don't you worry, I made one for you too. He then hands Crappy Dad an even bigger scrap of red cloth with the word loser on it. The dad just completely deflated, realizing that he was just beaten at his own game, and there was no way in hell that he was beating Brass Balls at this. So he kind of mumbles and leaves, and the funniest part is he took the loser ribbon with him. The best part is, Greg actually wore that handmade loser ribbon to class every single day until he finally passed his test. He completely owned the loser ribbon and he turned it into a source of motivation. Brass Balls was very proud of him. The day he passed his test, Brass Balls was smiling and telling him that he knew he could do it. I have no idea where he is now, but good on ya, man. I hope you're still owning your failures and getting stronger from them. I freaking love this so much, and Greg is honestly a badass because only a real badass can take something like that, roll with it, and turn it into an uncontestable win. No frickin' handouts in life. I love that. But yeah, Brass Balls knew what tough love's all about, and it's just so wholesome to know that he was smiling when Greg did finally pass. This was a couple of months back in May. I'd been living in an apartment with 3 other roommates, so 4 of us total for about 8 months. We were all women in our 20s. I barely interacted with my other roommates at all. Just between our jobs and classes, we never saw each other. We all had our own rooms as well. For some context, on May 5th, my fiancé and I were planning to move into a new apartment together. So by the evening of the 4th, I had all of my belongings packed up. More on that later. Though I barely interacted with my roommates, I felt like we coexisted well, and we never fought or argued about anything, except for some very minor instances with these girls named Vicky and Kara. Those 2 are friends, and Vicky was definitely the messiest of the 4 of us living there. She would always leave her clothes in the dryer for days, piled up dishes in the sink for more than a week before cleaning them, and she would often forget about food in the fridge until it rots. Maybe 5 times throughout my time living there, I would get a text in our group chat from Kara, saying something like, "Hey OP, I talked to the others and they said the dishes in the sink aren't theirs, so please clean them." This was annoying, but it happened infrequently enough that it wasn't awful. And I figured that Vicky lied to Kara about the messes, since it was easier to throw me under the bus than to clean it up herself. Well, on the evening of May 4th, so the night before I was planning to move out, Kara sends me a very long and scathing text message to the group chat. She went on and on how she's tired of my messes, hates all my stuff strewn about in the apartment, and she also personally attacked me, calling me disgusting and an inconsiderate slob. Since I was leaving literally the next day and I didn't see any reason to start a fight, I just said it was her lucky day, and I was actually moving out the next morning. She replied, "Whatever you say, just take all your stuff and leave, you slob." Now for the malicious compliance. As I mentioned earlier, I had packed most of my belongings already, but technically not everything. The 4 of us all moved in the apartment about the same date, but I moved in a few extra days earlier than the others. This means I bought a ton of communal items myself. I was planning to leave these out of kindness, despite them being worth well over $400. However, once I got that text from Kara, I decided that I would in fact take all of my stuff and leave. These communal items included all the trash cans in the whole apartment, which was about $100, the Wi-Fi router, $150, a large metal shelving rack, probably the one that hurt the most, which was $150. And there were some more items. The shelving rack was likely the most devastating loss for them, since they had tons of stuff. For reference, the kitchen had 10 cupboards and 8 drawers, of which I used 2 cupboards and 1 drawer to store my items. The cupboards I used were also the ones above the microwave and the fridge, since I'm the tallest and I wanted to be considerate. All the rest of the cupboards, drawers, and the entire metal rack, which had 5 large shelves, were filled to the brim with my roommate's stuff. Essentially, there was absolutely no way that they'd be able to fit it in the amount of space I left behind, without buying another rack or putting it on the counter and floor. I was careful to keep all of their stuff from the rack organized and neat when I removed it, and everything from the rack completely covered the counters, the kitchen table, and the coffee table in the living room. I moved out peacefully with all of my belongings the next day, and I've been very happy in my new apartment with my fiancé. A few days after moving out, Vicky texted in the group chat, "For your information, the Wi-Fi's not working anymore. I wonder why." And at that point, I left the chat. I've wondered how long it took Kara to realize that it was actually never me that was making messes in the apartment, but I guess I'll never know. Well, frickin' played, OP, and I love a good roommate, Malicious Compliance. And in my opinion, I'm pretty sure OP doesn't need to worry because I'm sure Kara found out real quick who made the messes. Like, it's easy to blame the roommate that's hardly there for the mess until that roommate leaves and the messes still come back. And this person comments, this happened to a friend. Roommate accuses him of leaving his dishes in the sink in the group chat. He takes a picture of the mess in the sink and asks if all of it is his. Got an affirmative from his accuser. He was moving out in 2 days, so it was impossible for those to be his. He replies with an okay, washes the dishes, and proceeds to pack them up too. His accuser loses his crap 3 days later. All my friend did was reply with a screenshot of his accuser saying the dishes were his. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where Karens are messing up big time and they're getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.